Ladies and gentlemen, innovating for the future, transforming global banking through fintech partnership. Well, we have with us the moderator for this conversation is going to be Mr. Madhusudanan, our co-founder of M2P Fintech, along with the esteemed speakers joining, Mr. Arjun Singh, partner Arthur D. Little. We have Mr. Mahmoud, Abuebeid, the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Global Software Solutions Group. We have Mr. Abhijit Singh, Group Head, Banking as a Service, International Banking and Digital Ecosystem Banking, HDFC Bank. And we also have Sanjeev Purushottam, who's the founder and CEO of Bridge Solutions. Let's give all of them a warmer round of applause as we welcome them on the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's post-lunch and on day 3, so we'll try and see this, how to keep this conversation, sort of interesting. And I also have on the panel, 4 gentlemen who come from, different backgrounds, so that, we'll add a lot of color and different perspectives as well. I'm looking forward to this conversation as much as, you are all. Maybe I'll start with Arjun in terms of just to give just his thoughts on what he actually thinks of global partnerships and fintechs, and then we'll just go around the table and I'll come back with questions.
Okay, thanks a lot, Madhu. And I tried to bring color. I'm wearing yellow socks, so I hope that does add some color to it. Thank you for all of you staying in. My name is Arjun Singh. I work for a consulting firm for my sins. It's a firm called Arthur D. Little. We've been around for about 135 years. I feel that old certain days of the week. So let's take this context of banking, fintech collaboration for the better of, I guess, the better of the world. In my sort of humorous sense, I think I've been in this world of fintech banking for about a decade and a half. A lot before the word fintech came around. A lot before. Definitely before banking as a service came around, so on and so forth. But there are 3 or 4 points that I'd like to make, right? So firstly, it's very obvious that the narrative has shifted from fintechs versus banks to fintechs with banks, right? Or fintechs for banks. And I think that's a very important narrative. And I think that is the North Star, which will bode well for both counterparties in this case, right? The second point is, I think banks have realized that the disruption or the innovation cycle is so rapid that the days of let's build it and they will come has moved on to let's look at working with the best of breed providers for specific capabilities, specifically around technology, because a lot of that disruption is driven by technology. So slowly and steadily, they are actually opening up. And I think we need to be cognizant that, we're very quick at blaming banks for being slow, for banks for being not as responsive. But let's understand, banks were never created for customers. They were created for regulators, right? Their job is to control and manage the monetary policy of a nation. And that's their first and primary responsibility, right? They're they're big organizations with old technology or legacy technology, and it takes time. So that's the second point. The third point is, I think, what's very reassuring, and I think the last 3 days in India has been brilliant, although a little narrow in terms of the full fintech story of India, is we're starting to see some very good depth and width in the quality of fintechs, right? It's good quality infrastructure, solving some real problems with some new age technology, which is scalable to what I might call enterprise and bank grade. So I think those are the 3 sort of overarching themes. And if I sort of color all of this with what I feel there is an umbrella trend, which is this symbiotic relationship, and I write about it quite often, right? More to actually get some feedback where we're seeing globally this concept of open banking, open finance, right? We're also seeing this concept of embedded finance, and embedded finance itself is quite interesting, and if given a chance, I'll come back to it. Banks have to find a way of how do they monetize this regulatory shift and the role they can play in embedded finance. And they will assume a number of new models, and BaaS is one of those models. So I'll give up on that. I hope those were the sort of 4 overarching themes which I think form the basis of this collaboration. Madhu, back
Fantastic, great way to start, Arjun. Abhijit, your thoughts?
I think the question is my day job. So I see what I do see, from the vantage point of banks is that, as Arjun I think rightly said, banks have to take care of the deposits that customers put in, take care that all the security features etc. are in place. There's a beautiful intersection which is coming in. So there was this whole narrative about fintechs will give a lot of competition to the banks, and rightfully so in certain areas. But there is a place where I feel there are places where you can compete with fintechs, and there is a very large area where you can collaborate with fintechs. Yeah? So in our journey as creating the banking as a service, what we are also looking at is the fintechs bring a very customer-centric, a very different way of selling the same product. And we've seen, with our partnership, that the same fixed deposit, the way we think and the way a fintech thinks are very different. So for us, that intersection in BaaS is actually helping us get all the great things that fintech does from a customer experience point of view. A lot of things that they do, our teams also start learning and start to look at it from that perspective. And as a bank, we bring in a very strong regulatory regime, regulatory discipline. So the whole thing is actually working very well. And that's where I think the sweet spot is between the two entities.
Mahmoud, your thoughts on?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for starting, Arjun. So I'm Mahmoud Abuebeid. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Global Software Solution Group, a UAE-based company, software product company in the United Arab Emirates. We are basically doing the real-time payment, which we call ANI, similar to the UPI in the United Arab Emirates. We've been pioneering in that space of the real-time payment. We saw that there is a shift for the last 5 years, especially when our central bank of the UAE declared for the FIT program, Financial Infrastructure Transformation, to transform the bank's legacy system and make them more robust, responsive, give a better customer experience. Obviously, we've seen the fintech and the bank's partnership, and this is again due to the robustness of the digital transformation. We're seeing also there is a regulatory support and push for the open finance or open banking piece, again, to enhance the customer experience. There are a lot of trends in the area, in the GCC area, in the UAE, especially the cross-border remittances system, specifically between ANI and UPI, since they signed an MOU together. Also, you can see between the GCC countries, something we call GCC RTGS, and between the Arabic-speaking country, Buna, those are the payments network that we're having. This has been really transformed since the last 4 years, and we've been working closely with the central bank, Al-Ittihad Payments, how we can enhance all of those. And yes, I can see that there is a lot of collaboration between the fintechs and the bank system. And definitely in the next 3 to 4 years, there will be an improvement, better customer experience. We're learning a lot from India. We're fortunate to have a great ties with India from their experience since 2016 with their UPI and MPCI, obviously. Thanks.
Awesome. Sanjeev, you have been a champion of these partnerships between banks and fintechs. Your thoughts?
I think before I start that off on the partnership space, I just want to hark back a little bit. Mahmoud is the youngest in the room. I'm probably the oldest on the panel. And it's a great opportunity to actually see this baton of Indian technology being consumed by countries around the world. It's a fabulous story. And I'm particularly proud about this because, and I'm going to date myself, okay? Many of you are going to be surprised by this. 1987, I walked out of the IM campus and I joined a company, American Express Bank. And my first job with my boss, Raman Roy, was to basically digitize our telecounters. And I sat down there and I worked night and day for about 3 months. and transformed our counters from manual processes to digital processes. Raman then went on to start Spectrum Mind, which then kicked off the entire financial fintech revolution in this country. So I'm proud to have been part of that initial story. And it's not a new story about India's excellence in technology. That massive technological capability enabled me to then become, head digital functions, lending functions globally. And then what I realized most importantly is that there are some global fintechs that transform banking in a fundamental way. And I was proud to work with one of them, which was MasterCard. As a global fintech, MasterCard has transformed banking across the world. There's no doubt about it. The technologies, the systems, the security capabilities that they've put into the global systems, along with our competitor, whom I won't name, have made it possible for a lot of financial technology companies to then come on board. And you're smiling. But I think that's where the global financial technology companies have created companies like American Express, like MasterCard, like IBM, have created this capability set. And today I'm equally proud to say that NPCI has that same level of global vision and creating standards across the world, just like the older American companies did. So it's a proud moment, a big moment to come back and see this happening now. We consumed technology earlier, and now we're exporting it out globally. It's a fantastic transformation.
Awesome. In fact, this morning, I had the honor of hosting Prime Minister in my booth. And I spoke about two things, and one of that you touched on. Talking about, he was very curious to understand what is BaaS, because we spoke about BaaS and, how this is changing the world. And so I was actually amazed at his curiosity to know what it is and how is it helping and whatnot. And the other thing that I told him is that over the last 20 years, India has become a net exporter of banking technology. Not so long ago, we used to look up to West to actually import pretty much every core system. And in the last 10 years, we've actually seen that change where, India is today looked up as the fintech factory for the world, right? So, yeah, I mean, it fully resonates and it's just top of mind. It's still sinking in for me at least. Arjun, on that, point, right? Since you kind of cover so many markets and you have like front row seat in a number of other markets in the Middle East, how easy or difficult it is when the regulator and the payment ecosystem is innovating faster than fintechs, right? Like I don't know of another nation where the pace of change is so rapid that a couple of weeks ago, just in the build-up to GFF, to give you an example, we had to take some program live for a bank, and all of us huddled up and said, yes, this is something that we need to do. And we called up NPCA folks, and then we said something that we want to launch because the bank is very keen. Boom! In 3 hours, we actually got the product certified. Before an email could get delivered and somebody could be assigned to do the work, we actually got that done. So in fact, therefore, if you really look at who is setting the tone and the pace, it's more the regulator followed by the network in India, especially. And how are you seeing this? And because it's very vital to have that ecosystem momentum at play. Otherwise, in markets where it's non-existent, it's really hard to get that momentum going.
Hard question. Let me try and answer it because I guess so. Let me try and play back with what I think India has done incredibly well, and I think what the rest of the world, some of the countries are doing as well, others might not be, and why do you feel? I think firstly, you got to understand something. A lot of the countries in the Middle East are at a very early, a very nascent stage of this shift, okay? Second point is, if you take the erstwhile banks, they are disproportionately more profitable as entities when you compare them with their peer group in other parts of the world. So, there's the old adage that if it's not broken, why should we fix it, right? Thirdly, I think I read some posts from a gentleman yesterday who said, 75,000 fintech founders are going to imagine something new and then they're going to realize that NPCI has built it already, whether it's UPI or now the ULI. I tend to disagree. I think what you guys have done in India, which is incredible, is I guess in crypto parlay, you've built the layer one. So I think what the government has delivered here is delivered a very stable layer one, which then allows you to play a lot more freely as fintechs in an environment which is big enough, but there is a certain amount of a square. We don't have such scenarios in a lot of other countries, right? Uh, we don't have public good infrastructure players like you do. So having said that, I think every regulator in the Middle East now see themselves as market makers. I think those days are gone when it was about setting policy, okay? You have banks who are slowly and steadily evolving, right? Because the fintechs might not have created incredible competition, but they've changed the mindset in the customer. So now the customer expects instant statement downloads, or why don't I have a 24/7 app, and why can't I make a transfer at 3 a.m. in the morning, and why do I have to pay bank towards? But I think we just have to wait and watch. I can understand that a lot of frustration would come from Indian fintechs, especially infrastructure providers, because you're used to an ecosystem which you just said responds in 3 weeks, and your sales cycle in the Middle East could be a year, right? I think you guys will have to recalibrate for every market to operate in that. And I think we're seeing a bit of that, and I think Sanjeev can actually agree or disagree with me on this, is even in the Asia-Pac region, right, the speed of disruption, what happens in Singapore is not the same which happens in Indonesia or for example, Philippines and Thailand, the big countries, because they're also further behind the curve. So I guess that's a long-winded answer. I think change is coming. It's not going to come at the pace as you guys are. I think regulatory harmonization, if these trading blocks can achieve, whether it's the GCC or the ASEAN, I think will catalyze the shift. Otherwise, I think it'll be more expensive and more time consuming. So that's kind of my long-winded answer.
Do you want to add to that, Mohammed?
Honestly, I agree with some of your points. Sometimes there are some points which I disagree. The UAE, or specifically the UAE, let's say, they are now allowing a lot of foreign fintech companies to come and open, and literally they can open their companies in one day time in ADGM, Abu Dhabi Global Market, or DIFC. They want to be ahead of time. By 2030, they have a mandate to make the central bank of the UAE top 10 worldwide. Now, to reach such a stage, you need to deal with partners. Who's our main partner? India. So India, now you can see, like, we're learning from the MOU signed. We're the MOUs. Now we're doing the car domestic scheme, which is J1. I forgot to mention about the programs, which is the FinTech infrastructure transformation. We're talking about real-time payment, equivalent to UPI. We're talking about car domestic scheme, J1, equivalent to RuPay. We're talking about the open finance piece, which there's a new entity called NIBRAS, similar to the aggregators here. And we're talking about, obviously, CBDC, all of that. Yes, it needs time. It needs the right partnership. It needs the right technology. You need the right proper cloud technology. That's why Microsoft have invested in G42 $1.5 billion. Obviously, there are different reasons for that, but the main thing is to empower the country to improve a lot of things. You can see one of the main companies, fintech companies, PhonePe, now they are getting their license from the central bank. Before, a long time ago, like probably 5 years ago, if you want to acquire a license from the central bank, let's say a payment service provider, a stored value wallet, whatsoever, you would need probably more than 9 months. Nowadays, within little time, give them the business plan, give them how you want to add a value to the country and to the citizens, the people who are living. Then they will support you, and then they are allowing Indian citizens to use their RuPay in the country for a lot of population adoption, and obviously to give them the transparency and whatsoever. So there are risks. You need the right people. Central bank have also created Al-Ittihad payments, which is the main, which is similar to MPCI, the one that provides the projects, the payments, all of these projects. They are initiating them. I think we're just, putting the puzzles together very soon, and definitely there will be a good news by 2025.
So I'd like to riff off there from Mahmoud, right? And It's a very, I really
Sure.
want to respond to that. Um, Bridge DFS, Bridge Solutions basically bridges solutions across from one market to the other, and it basically takes solutions from Singapore, India, and takes it to the Middle East. And that's why I wanted to respond to Mahmoud. One of the things that Mahmoud said was really, really super critical. When the UAE looks at a country or a market and decides that that's the model market, they very, very, very quickly execute, right? So, and I can say that the UAE took the Singapore as a market, as a model for development for real estate, for public transit, for infrastructure like roads and rails. And very soon, the UAE was on par with Singapore, right? Very soon, because their execution power is fantastic. No doubt about it. Right? And that, when Mahmoud says that they're looking at India as an inspiration, I know for a fact that very, very, very quickly, they're going to be up there on top of this entire story. And therein lies a very interesting piece of the puzzle, which, I've been sort of, as a technologist, as a banker, I've been following the whole story of CBDCs and stablecoins very closely. And the one thing that's coming to my mind right now is when you look at the UAE, a stable currency, with a CBDC story behind it at the policy level and a stablecoin policy level coming up, very soon you're going to be having the potential for a stable coin issued by banks to be globally acceptable because the UAE currency is a stable currency. And that's what I mean by saying global partnerships that impact the banking industry. The way this is moving right now, it's not at a country level, it's basically at a business category level that banking is shifting, right? So there are going to be categories of banking that correspondent banking, Arjun and I were talking about this earlier today. Correspondent banking is going to become a global phenomenon of some kind. There's going to be, cross-border banking is going to be transformative. And all of this is going to be happening because of countries like the UAE, which play such a central and pivotal role in creating the infrastructure that allows global connectivity. Isn't that right, Mahmoud?
That's true. You hit it in the spot. Yeah, we execute very fast, thanks to like advisors from India, Singapore, around the world. They've been always our supporters.
Awesome, awesome. Abhijit, if I can come back to you, HDFC has been on top gear in terms of the digital transformation. Bunch of things got announced in the last few months, including the recent one earlier this week on the new version of the mobile banking app. How is the bank looking at some of these partnerships? Are you looking more of co-creation? Are you taking inspirations from some of these fintechs? Are there ideas being drawn from any color on how the bank is looking at it, and more from a partnership perspective as well as how to kind of take this forward? I know it's a large bank, things take time to sort of execute because you have a massive responsibility from a customer base standpoint. Would love to hear your thoughts.
I think, again, quite a tough question to answer very simply. Yeah. I think, I'll just maybe trace back to my own career and how thoughts are changing. So when I was with one of the other larger banks, typically for mobile applications, you will say, okay, what's bank A doing, what's bank B doing, what bank C doing, and that's what you would compete and show. I think over the last 5, 7, 10 years, it's completely changed. And when you go to boardrooms with things like, my app has this and his app is this, they talk what Arjun, I think, talked about. How does Amazon do this? Or, the question is, if one of these Flipkarts or Amazon or some startup is going to look at banking, how are they going to re-envision banking? And that's where I think I see that happening in HDFC also, where we've started to, and the customer is also demanding. So a couple of things which have happened is that, as I think we tried to allude, the government had the will to do something. I think I remember the days when Jandan happened, I was with another bank, and the kind of target that was set up, we thought, God, how is this going to happen? But it's, setting up big goals like this, which push the whole country to achieve something. look at Aadhaar, as a completely impossible. How does it work? In many countries where I go to, they ask the same question. Yeah. So very big goals have been set up and things are actually moving in that direction. So banks in a way are no longer in the driving seat. It is the customer's experience which is actually driving many of these initiatives. So if you look at some of our strategy, in some places we have gone with an app, let's say for wealth, because wealth itself is so deep. And if you try and make a common app for both, it's very difficult to address all the nuances of wealth management. So if we see a lot of these strategies are actually coming from customer feedback, from a lot of partners. So gone are the days when we would sit and say, "Aisa banao." It's the other way around, like let's say if you come or some partners come and they say, "I don't like your API." So you say, "Acha, aap batao, what do you think should the API be?" And largely we are trying to, maybe apply our mind, but 95% I think you guys are right, because banking is not so complicated. At least retail banking products are not so complicated. So a lot of times we are looking at customer feedback in many of these things. If you see the WhatsApp that we have done, you could do fixed deposits so quickly. That even I don't think we can do it on any of our mobile apps so quickly. Yeah. So some of these things are actually coming from feedback which customers are giving, which fintechs are giving. So we are in a big listening mode at this moment. Right time for fintechs to come and experiment ideas with us. We are very open to collaborate. I think we have worked internally on our processes. I think the biggest problem any bank has is onboarding new partners. We do it now very quickly. We have re-engineered the processes. So I think the time is right for fintechs to start partnering with a bank like us.
In fact, I met Ramesh earlier this week and I was asking him, how are you able to manage the engineering hiring in Bangalore? For all they run a digital factory, as it's called. Fascinating how, that has changed the pace of innovation at HDFC Bank. Sanjeev, if we can come to you, you know, one of the themes of this particular GFF is responsible AI. And, yesterday in some of the panelists said that a lot of the AI work is actually in the periphery. Nothing at the core is changing from a banker perspective. A lot more is on the front end where it's more customer facing units. But how are you seeing this evolve in the next 5 years? Let's say, if I have to crystal ball gaze, because you have visibility into a lot of this action both in Singapore, I mean in this in the developed part of the world, and then the ideas that get ported to other markets as well. Do you realistically see how fundamentally there could be a shift, or you still feel that because it's regulated and it's got to be contained in a certain way, that change could be hard to come by? I fully appreciate changes related to how life cycles are going to shift and on all of that, but at the core product and offering level, because one of the themes that has emerged from Indian regulators also is that in underwriting specifically, right? You cannot have algorithmic lending, right? It's not that you cannot have, but you should still have a human element so that the system doesn't go rogue and it actually defeats the whole purpose of digitizing some of this.
It's a very interesting thought. And just before we walked on the stage, Abhijit and I were sharing a WhatsApp conversation with a bot, okay? And it was a very interesting bot because all it does is you talk to the bot and you take a picture of your card, it creates a VCF immediately, and then links you up by LinkedIn directly to the person you've just taken the card from, and you return the card to the person, right? So all of a sudden, I just carry one card into a conference, and then I tell the person to download the app, or not download the app, just download the contact and just take my details. So all of a sudden, all that NFC stuff thrown out of the window, right? It's just a simple WhatsApp conversation. And I think that this conversational banking is going to become a reality. You're going to have your favorite banking bot or your favorite AI banker. Honestly, that's what's going to happen, right? And if you think that this is going to be only in the consumer domain, no, it's not going to be only in the consumer domain. It's going to be in the corporate banking domain. It's going to be in the in the treasury domain, in every single domain. You're going to have basic instant communication as being the basis for any kind of banking transaction that's taking place. Now, what's going to run at the back of this? In order to be able to manage all this massive amounts of data requirements, you need to have massive computing. And to have that massive computing, the next question becomes, okay, let's go to quantum. And then quantum is a different issue because now you've got a dual state problem. Nothing is actually defined. You're actually cracking open the entire database and saying, your entire data is exposed. And that's where I think fundamentally you need to start looking at the challenge. The challenge is what's going to happen when quantum comes in, right? And that's where regulators need to be actually regulating. What do we need to do to start looking at quantum attacking the banking system? It's not going to be about regulating processes and policies and stuff like that, right? It's not an internet moment. It's not. A lot of people compare this to the dot-com era. This is not the dot-com era. This is a complete transformation of us and our society as we know it. It's not a process change. It's an exponential change of everything that we know. So are the regulators capable of actually regulating at a procedural level? I doubt it. Are they capable of regulating at a macro level? I think that's where you need to have the intellectual brain power to be able to start thinking along these lines and coming up with saying, how do we manage quantum?
If I may add something to it. I think as rightly said, what's going to happen with this is you have two areas, where you need help. So let's say this transaction that we did, copy pasting the address, finding my LinkedIn, adding to LinkedIn, that's, do things faster for me. So that's where, some of AI technology, some automation is working. But I think the bigger one which will come up for customers as well as for employee, both EX and CX, is going to be, can you advise me, am I doing the right thing? I think that's where it will get into. And personal assistants will probably be the biggest thing where AI and these technologies will start playing. You will have a personal assistant for everything. As just imagining world 10 years from now, you might have some bot which helps you travel, some bot which helps you with investments, some bot which is actually making things easier for you. So whole bouquet of personal assistants will actually start working for you is what we think.
Interesting. Any thoughts, Arjun, for AI banking?
It's anything you say is wrong the second you say it is, I guess, my view on AI. I think I don't have a cynical view, but I have a cautious view. I think the genie's out of the bottle, right? As I see it, I think if I see the positive slant, if you see all these technologies, whether it is AI, blockchain, cloud, they're basically going to make banking and commerce seamless, right? So we're going to have embedded banking in commerce, and you're going to have embedded commerce in banking, whether it comes through bots or comes through any other instrument. I don't know enough about quantum to be able to sit on this panel and be able to sort of give anything definitive. What I don't actually understand is how and who's going to define what is responsible AI, right? And how will we actually govern that? Because so much of it is left to personal interpretation, right? I think I agree with you. If you start doing governance at a procedural level, forget it, right? There's just no way out. My biggest fear with AI is as it actually grows in terms of the amount of usage, right? And then I think we're already starting to see a lot of hallucination which is happening, and we're only at the tip of the iceberg, right? So at what stage do these personal assistants, right, start advising us on what they think is the right answer rather than actually being able to suck in information? So I think there are better experts than me who can possibly answer the question on responsible AI, but I do think it is a defining moment for financial services. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, this is actually going to get trickier and trickier.
Interesting. I think if I have a personal assistant that can block spam calls, that's a good start.
Yeah, no, that will be wonderful. And the great point that he made was, that you can get advice, but ultimately judgment will always be yours. So no matter what you do, it's not going to be, okay, do this and click and move on. And that's where hopefully humans will differentiate against all the robots.
The intelligence or the lack of it. So, from a human perspective.
Yeah, I'll give you a very simple point. I think, so I work for a management consulting firm, right? My biggest fear right now is what are my analysts doing when they're actually writing deliverables? Are they actually writing? I have no issues with them using some form of Claude AI or ChatGPT to accelerate their work. But if it's become a cut and paste job, my biggest fear now is that is the content on it actually correct? And then that fact checking is then arguably more time consuming because you're looking for the unknown, right? So I guess this is the problem. And then you add financial services, and especially in wealth management, you know, a lot of wealth tech platforms are saying, you know, we are completely AI driven, so on and so forth. I do get a bit concerned about it, but maybe I'm just getting old, right?
Yeah, actually, my son was, copy pasting something, and I asked, and then he went and corrected some words. And he said that I'm doing, I asked him, why are you correcting the spelling? What is out there is the right one. He said that the teacher will figure out that I, copy pasted. So I just, willfully making some spelling mistakes, so
Smart
that,
guy.
it's not discoverable, right? So there you go. So people will figure out ways to, crack the code. Mohammed, if I can come to you for the last question, I think we'll have some more, some time for the Q&A from the audience. So are you seeing opportunities where Indian companies are going to partner in this growth that you spoken about, just a while back, where you're going to take inspiration from India, and so therefore you have to take Indian companies along with you. So how many of us can come with you on the flight back?
No, please, I'll ask Emirates or Etihad to host you all. Obviously, there is a huge potential for the Indian companies to come to the UAE or to the GCC since they have a great experience in digital payments, into probably AI, and most importantly, into financial inclusion. Don't forget, the UAE, where 80% they live non-UAE nationals. So obviously we need a lot of financial inclusions. We have also a lot of, I would say, blue-collar workers that we need to help them in terms of having proper services where they can send money back home easier and faster. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, PhonePe now is getting their license. There are another multiple companies, and I'm supporting a lot of Indian companies to come and open their branch in the United Arab Emirates. Last December, we hosted MPCI, RBI for the Fintech Panorama. It was great. We had a closed loop, and we discussed many opportunities for that. There is a great expertise for the Indian companies to collaborate there. And I advise them to come. And we are actually doing a lot of partnership with them, like not just for opening an office for them, but also to guide them, to open doors for them with the financial institution like banks. Now banks, they're giving us a lot of trust in terms of our company, our holding company, our team. And they told us, what can you also offer? Obviously, you cannot do everything. You have to deal with different partners. You have to, for example, open finance. I've invested in an open finance company. I'm dealing with them also. I'm bringing the open finance mindset to the UAE. One of the main things, and please, if anyone can support this, the B2B business. This is very important. Business to business payments. I don't think India, they still have 3 companies which is doing that. Now I advise in a company, I'm part of a board member of a company called X Square. We're trying to develop it. This will avoid the MDR payments. This will avoid the MDR percentage of course, the international schemes. We invest also in AI's companies. AI, obviously, as Arjun said, it's a broad subject. We never know. Obviously, if it's given to the bad guys, if it's going to be misused. So AI, cybersecurity is very important. Yearly $500 million are lost just like this, just in the US for hackers. And yes, I see a lot of opportunities, and we're willing to support.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. We probably have time for 1 or 2 questions. Anyone?
Can I just add to
Sure.
that? And if you really want to bridge across to the UAE, come to Bridge Solutions, because that's yeah.
Any questions from the audience?
We'll get the mic passed. So if you can have your name and, of course, a concise question, whom would you like to address it to?
Yeah, hi. My name is Manish. This question for Mr. Mohammed. So, what is the probability and at what pace you are seeing the role of digital public infrastructure of various countries are coming and creating a global impact on banking processes?
As one of the gentlemen was saying, it all depends on See, each country has their own pace, obviously, and it depends on the population, it depends on the demand, it depends on the needs, it depends what are you providing in the country, which kind of infrastructure. Is it developed? Is it easy? Is it flexible? Now, obviously, you need companies to help you to do that. As a country, you might not have the expertise. Those companies, when they come to the specific country, are you providing for them a proper license? Can they open their company immediately? Can they have and integrate with the banks seamlessly? Will the banks be open up for them? Will the regulatory allow that? So it all depends from country to country. I believe India and Southeast Asia, Singapore, and those countries, they have a very fast pace. Then the next stage would be the Middle East, and Europe and US still they have quite time because they're dealing with a closed loops. But it always depends on the country and their opportunities. Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
Let me answer, just add to that. I think we shouldn't take this as a working assumption that since India has built their infrastructure on the back of digital public goods, every other country is going to go down that route, right? I think you guys who's interested in coming to different parts, whether it's Middle East, Central Asia, you've got to start looking at these countries as individual countries, right? I can say with a person who spends all his time in that part of the world, there are lots of differences in the way Saudi Arabia operates, to the UAE, to the Qatar, to Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan. So, let's not make a sweeping assumption that everybody will go down the India route.
And I'd like to add to that, Arjun, because the question is that, let's take Kenya, for example, right? Kenya has reached the bottom of the pyramid without a digital public infrastructure. It was a policy-driven decision to allow the telecommunication companies to provide financial services. In fact, if you read a recent LinkedIn article of mine that went viral, you'll see exactly why it is today. Even now, we've not been able to solve, and T. Koshi talked about this in his session on ONDC, that we've not been able to solve the problem of the last 350 million people who don't have smartphones in the country, in India, right? Whereas in Kenya and in all of Africa, USSD phones are the default standard for transactions. And it hasn't come to digital public infrastructure. So I don't think we should be considering that every country needs a digital public infrastructure. Commercial enterprises do as good a job.
Awesome. We are moving everyone to smartphones, Sanjeev, so we don't need USSD.
350 million people, I've got the stats on that, and I'm really strong stats. The number of smartphones is actually decreasing.
If our panelists are okay, and since we have a lot of interest in the audience to ask questions, can we go ahead and give them? All right.
Welcome, of course.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we do have an opportunity of allowing a couple more questions. If you do have, we'd request you to kindly raise your hand, and we'll get the question directed to our panelists. Yes, sir?
Thank you. Hi. Good afternoon. I'm Jinesh Gosar from Simplify Consulting. My question is to Mr. Mahmoud. You mentioned about B2B cross-border payments. What, according to you, is the biggest friction that is stopping companies to really come up and do some meaningful work there, like what has been done on the retail side?
All right. So you mentioned about the B2B cross-border. Cross-border, as you saw yesterday, the governor of RBI, Mr. Shrikant Das, he mentioned, or they launched a new product, which is where the businesses, they all talk common language. And this has started from India. And instead of dealing with a chaos, everyone is dealing with a different language. And you saw on the demo how Zoho receipt is transferring there. Now, obviously, there are challenges because there are so many parties involved. Why the business-to-business payments is not improving? Simply look at the MDR. MDR is shared between three parties. It's shared between the acquirer, it's shared between the issuer, and obviously the card scheme. Now the card scheme, we're talking about 2 or 3 international companies without mentioning the name. Look at the acquirer. The acquirer is owned by large banks, and this is part of their income. Why would they destroy it? Why would they eliminate it, right? So this is the problem. So there is a kind of a challenge. Will I get the revenue from there, or shall I focus on the corporate? That is another thing. But if you look at India, when they started UPI, they focused on convincing the fintechs. They didn't go to the banks and start convincing them about this real-time payment. And this created a lot of better attraction. They went and they presented Mr. Paytm, PhonePay, GPay. This is how it is going to happen. It didn't affect the bank's revenue, right? It got more customers, more, I would say, individuals. They became on the platform. So there is no difficulties. Now it's becoming up. As you know, there is a trend in India, I believe. It's become the B2B payments, and it's going to come to the UAE. They're setting the frameworks, how it's going to be seamless, how there will not be duplications, how there will not be frauds. A lot of fraud is happening, duplicating the invoices so they can get a facility or invoice factoring on it. So obviously they are setting a framework on that. So that's why it's taking time, but they are welcoming companies to innovate. Yes.
Sure. Thank you. If I can ask,
I'm just going to add something to it. So let's just make this very simple, guys. We have to understand something. When you talk B2B payments, it's a huge universe, right? We have $150 trillion of cross-border B2B. There's about $6 trillion in B2C, right? So it's huge. If you look at the large corporates, that's not where the problem lies, right? So firstly, let's understand the problem lies for small and medium enterprises. Second thing you understand is B2B payments is incredibly complex because it's a trade-based payment, right? It is not about me passing money because Abhijit and me went out for dinner and we shared the bill. So there is a lot of complexity which is upstream before a payment is actually made. And thirdly, which is what you have to understand, which is very interesting, and I personally think this is where the focus hasn't happened, is a lot of that commerce never happened on digital platforms. Right? A lot of the consumer payments actually happened on digital platforms, e-commerce platforms, whether it was Amazon or so on and so forth. Most of the the micro and small business cross-border transactions also happens in a very traditional manner. So I think there's a number of macro reasons. And finally, I get the sense, don't hold me to it, I think it's just never been the flavor of the day. Right? And I think now people are realizing that, you take 1% out of that 150 trillion, imagine how much money you can put back into the pot, right? So that's my sort of 2 cents from a macro perspective.
Yeah, my follow-up question again to both of you. See, most part, and Arjun, Mr. Arjun, you mentioned it, right? That
it almost seems like a fireside chat, but we'll give you that opportunity. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Most volume of the B2B cross-border payment still goes through SWIFT. And schemes like Buna, AFAQ, the GCC RTGS, and similar elsewhere in the world as well. I have been from the correspondent banking background, and I feel that the pickup by the banks is not as much as I feel the potential is. So what is the reason really that this move away from SWIFT, the typical correspondent banking payment mode, where the real friction lies in terms of transparency, cost, access, everything, has not, being solved using Buna or GCC RTGS and similar other schemes?
So I can't answer that question. So, this is a much longer debate, right? Firstly, I think SWIFT doesn't move money; it's a messaging system. So let's SWIFT. Let's tackle whether SWIFT has an existential challenge for them. Some people say it is. Some people they say it isn't. Corresponding banking network has so much sunken cost, and you as a banker would understand, this is, 20, 30, 40 years into the making, right? And there hasn't been enough demand. Remember something, these are significant size payments, so it comes with a certain level of assurances that you need. Banks provide that assurances, that's what corresponding banking networks do. There's a cost of that assurance which is associated, right? Which is very dissimilar to, let's be honest, me moving $100 to Mahmoud from India to the US. So longer debate to be had. I do think you will see a lot of shift. I think there's some very interesting things which are happening on the digital asset space. Maybe that's kind of where the disruption will come, right? But I think the space is going to get really, really hot. I think this entire B2B fintech space, right? Or if I call it MSME fintech space, whether it's payments, lending, savings, whatever it is I think the next 10 years or where the focus will be in kind of fintech 1.0.
If you want me just to add one more point, one of the best examples is UPI and PayNow. If you look at them, which is Singapore, 2 schemes, you're connecting them together. Obviously, SWIFT is the dollar, and as Arjun was mentioning, it's a different subject. There will be, I would say, international remittance boom in the coming years. The UAE is now working with ANI and UPI Who will benefit between these two schemes? The banks, obviously, the banks from the UAE, they will put their exchange rate, and the recipient bank will obviously, the beneficiary, the Indian bank will put their obviously exchange rate. Who will pay it at the end? The consumer. Now, will it be faster? They're saying it's not going to. It's going to be immediate. It's not going to be T+1 or T+2. And as you know, politically, T+1, T+2 is done on purpose initially because they want to keep the money, right? They want to keep it for interest. They want to keep it for different things, money float, all of that. So, does technology make you transfer the money immediately? Yes, it's possible. It's, as I said, it's a political thing. There are different things to invest the money, but it's coming up. There will be a boom between the countries connecting together.
Sure. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, as much as I would like to engage further questions, but we do have to respect the time which has been given, and we'd like to humbly thank all our eminent panelists for allowing us to extend a little bit on your tight schedule.